These days, it is much easier said than done to get a good night's sleep. So if you clicked on this video, I bet you're looking to make a few changes to your nighttime routine. Sleep can impact your physical health, your mental health, your mood, your appetite, and so much more. So in this video, we'll be talking about how and not just what to eat for better sleep. Let's start with a big one, which is the timing of your meals. My clients overlook this a lot because of busy schedules or after school activities with their kids or any of the other routine things they have to do just to keep a house running. And as a result, meal times can get pushed further and further back in the evening, which means you end up eating a larger meal too close to bedtime. And yes, we absolutely need that mix of carbs, protein, fat, and other nutrients in our meals, but that can also mean that your digestive system is trying to ramp up whenever you're ready to lie down. But the fix here is not to skip a meal or eat less because undereating is actually a huge stressor on the body. Eventually, that's going to backfire, and shortchanging your intake is going to leave you feeling even more tired the next day. Instead, I recommend aiming for earlier meals whenever you can. And if your schedule just doesn't allow that, you might have to break it up into mini meals or more frequent snacks. And yeah, this could mean eating when you're not explicitly hungry. Like you may not notice your stomach is growling, but I really want you to try to view this as a form of self-care because you're anticipating your future needs and responding in a way that's not going to inadvertently restrict your intake or leave you feeling too hungry before bedtime because that can also interfere with sleep. And while we're here, I have to say it is time to ditch that false belief that you can't eat after a certain time. It's such a common myth. You'll hear these food rules like, oh, you can't eat after 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. or some other arbitrary time. And you got to remember, your body doesn't have an on-off switch. Your ability to eat and digest food doesn't just magically turn itself off after a certain hour. And while we're talking about how to eat, we might as well zoom out and look at our overall lifestyle. Here's some changes I recommend that might be helpful. Try setting your phone out of reach so you're not tempted to doom scroll or waste away the time clicking through social media. And honestly, this is where I need to take my own advice because right now I have a terrible habit of watching TikTok or YouTube in bed. And honestly, it is not the best for my mental health, but I'm human, right? Like we've all been there. But moving on to my next tip, you can try to start associating certain sounds or scents with sleeping. For example, I have the Hatch Restore, and you can use the app to set a timer to play either sleep sounds or a playlist, and it's just a more gentle way to fall asleep. Plus, at least for me, I notice it really helps to muffle some of the noises coming in from the outside. So I linked to that in the description box below if you want to check it out. And while you're browsing, you might look for an aromatherapy candle or a diffuser for essential oils. Some of them are designed specifically with sleep in mind, but really you could try anything that creates a calm and relaxing environment to fall asleep in. And when it comes to movement, if your schedule allows, you might try to switch to a morning workout or something during the day instead of an intense workout in the evening or close to bedtime. Now, there are so many benefits to physical activity. We don't want to eliminate that option if it's something you enjoy, but it can keep your heart rate elevated or keep your body temperature a little bit higher than normal. And that makes it that much harder to fall asleep, especially in the summertime when it's already hot and humid. And a lot of sleep experts are going to recommend keeping a consistent schedule around when you go to bed and what time you wake up. Again, this is not something I'm currently doing because of work travel and some other commitments, but I can say I really do notice a difference when I'm able to, and it might make a difference for you too. My best advice as a dietitian who has counseled hundreds of clients is to give it time. We don't just magically form new habits overnight. One of my tips I love to share is habit stacking. So that's the idea of taking a new habit and stacking it on top of an existing one. So in this case, that might look like plugging in your phone in the bathroom while you brush your teeth so it can charge overnight, or setting out your workout clothes and shoes while you change into whatever you like to sleep in. I know this might sound like super basic and like overly simplified, but that is exactly what can get these new habits to stick long term. Plus, it just feels good to string together this series of small wins and feel like we're having some success when we try something different. But we're finally going to move into the part about some of the specific foods that might help support better sleep. Here's a short list of options you might want to consider adding if you're not already eating them. First up, we have our natural sources of melatonin. This includes things like tart cherries or tart cherry juice, oats and oatmeal, milk, bananas, and fatty fish like salmon. We can also include more foods that support melatonin production in your body, like nuts, especially walnuts and pistachios, that contain vitamin B6, tryptophan, and magnesium, plus omega-3 fatty acids. Dairy foods that are high in calcium and tryptophan, and fruits that are high in antioxidants like kiwis. And this is kind of interesting because a really small study found that eating 2 kiwis about an hour before bedtime could help you fall asleep more easily and stay asleep longer. And honestly, it's not the best designed study and the data set is really small. So take that association with a grain of salt. But since most of us aren't eating enough servings of fruit as it is, it's certainly not the worst way to try to support better sleep through nutrition. And I think it's also worth mentioning some of the things that might disrupt sleep or make it harder to fall asleep. Now, everyone's body is very different, so some of what I'm about to say might not apply to you at all, but as a dietitian, these are some of the things I see coming up most often. Try paying attention to foods that give you indigestion, like reflux or make you feel bloated or gassy. Sometimes there's no rhyme or reason as to what sets off these symptoms, but some of the more common culprits can include cruciferous vegetables, lots of garlic, onions, or other high FODMAP foods, dairy, or acidic foods. And I would also include spicy foods to a degree. And again, this really comes down to your individual tolerance and just how you do with spicy things. For myself, we cook all the time with hot sauces and hot peppers and other acidic ingredients that might cause issues for someone else, but for me, it's no big deal. But if you're sensitive to spicy foods, I would recommend shifting those ingredients or those types of meals to earlier in the day rather than just avoiding them altogether if it's foods you like. Now, the next one is a no-brainer. It's caffeine. So anything like coffee or energy drinks with high amounts of caffeine is obviously a no-go before bedtime. But I would also include things like caffeinated tea and even dark chocolate that have lower amounts of caffeine, and it might add up to a significant amount depending on how much you're having. And finally, alcohol. This is an interesting one because I hear a lot of people say how it helps them fall asleep, and that may be true, but it can actually disrupt sleep later in the night. And that's your call to make because you just have to ask yourself if that glass of wine or cocktail is really worth it because yeah, it might feel helpful at first and taste good and be enjoyable and that's great, but it may not actually be in your best interest if you're prioritizing better sleep when you're waking up every hour through the rest of the night. So I hope these quick tips were helpful for figuring out how and not just what to eat for better sleep. I'm Cara, and I'm the dietitian behind Street Smart Nutrition, where we use a non-diet approach and gentle nutrition to enjoy more fearlessly nourishing meals. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button for more videos like this one. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video soon.